Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about an online English teaching / tutoring platform called Cambly. I have only been using Cambly for 4 months now, and it has been more of a side gig for me, but I would say I've gotten a pretty good idea of what its strengths and weaknesses are. If you are a native English speaker, or at least close to native level, and you are interested in working online or getting into teaching English, Cambly might be a good side gig for you. On this platform, you can tutor adults, but there's also a kids side to this site. The application process is actually really simple, although I did procrastinate a lot because of the video aspect. You do have to submit an intro video, and if you want to apply for the kids side of the site, you will also have to upload a separate intro video and a sample lesson video with a slideshow that they provide. Once I finally did the video, I got accepted 9 hours later, so almost immediately. However, I know it can take a little bit more time depending on how busy they are, how many applications they have coming in. However, I actually did not get accepted for Cambly Kids right away. They did send me feedback in an email though. They told me I was using too much incidental language, which if you're not in the ESL TEFL realm of the world, then basically that means I was using too many words. So I was using too many words that would confuse the kids, especially beginner kids who are trying to really understand and can get caught up on one word. So I redid the video, I just read off the slides, and I got accepted. So then once I got accepted, the next step was to actually start tutoring. There are 2 ways you can go about this. The first way, which is usually what they recommend for people who are starting on the site, new tutors, and that is to do priority hours. To do this, you simply have to have 1 hour of free time, and then you go to your reservation schedule, select that hour, and then you'll be confirmed to be on a priority hour during that time. Before the hour begins and before any tutoring session on Cambly, you do have to complete a tutor warm-up, which is basically just an internet speed test. Once the hour begins, adult students will see you as available, and since you're on priority hour, you'll be near the top of the list. From there, students can request to speak specifically with you, or many students just have their Cambly set to, I don't really know how it works from the student side, but many students have it set so that they just get the next available tutor or a random tutor. So you could be just matched up with a random student. The time you'll speak with each student tends to vary, but most students tend to have lesson plans that include 30-minute lessons, whether it's 1 per week, 2 per week, 3 per week, even probably I think they have plans up to 5 per week. But other students just end the call when they feel like it. I remember in the beginning, I got one student who had 2 hours and 45 minutes on the clock at the top, and I was in shock thinking, how am I ever going to talk for that much time? And also it's 9 p.m. I don't want to stay up that late, but he just ended it. So I'm assuming he doesn't have his broken down into 30-minute sessions. It's just a rolling clock that he stops whenever the conversation ends. There are also free trial students, which are 5-minute calls that they don't really pay for. It's more to test out the site, but I haven't really had much experience with those. I do know people have had very bad experiences with those, but I will talk about that later. The second way to tutor on Cambly is to open up available hours and have students make reservations during that time. And this is what you will have to do if you want to tutor on Cambly Kids. You can open up as little as 15 minutes of time, but if you want to tutor on Cambly Kids, you'll have to open up at least a half-hour block because they have their lessons scheduled for 30 minutes at a time. For me, I started doing Cambly more as a side gig for some extra spending money, since I do have a main job teaching at a school in the Dominican Republic. And since I was teaching full-time, I only did this for roughly 10 hours or less per week, and that usually equaled out to about 3 half-hour sessions per day, and they were at different times per day depending on what times I was available. Now that it's the summer, since I am a teacher, I don't have classes, so I have opened up my availability a bit more, and I've been teaching more students during the summer. I've also made use of the feature where you can open up your schedule for kids only, which personally I just find a bit better suited to me, and it pays a little bit more as well. Now let's talk about regulars. Regulars are basically students that you have every week, which is probably self-explanatory. I met my first regular during the priority hours I did when I first started Cambly 4 months ago, and I actually did not have a schedule then where they could make reservations, but thankfully they came back a month later when I did have open hours available, and they reserved with me then. So since then, about a month later, for 3 months now, I've been tutoring the same student, and it is an adult student. My second regular is a kid, which obviously I met by opening up my schedule, and he reserved, and from there he kept reserving that same time slot. So then I was able to use a feature where you can hold a spot for a regular, which is when you just send an invitation to them specifically for a certain time period each week. Now, Cambly encourages you to have a lot of regulars. Personally, I don't find that really working for me because I have a very irregular schedule, and even though during the school year it can be more regular, it doesn't really bother me. My schedule tends to fill up anyways, so it's not really a big deal that I'm not teaching the same exact 5 people each week. Now let's talk about the pros and the cons of Cambly. For me, the best part is the flexibility. They don't have any requirements like minimum hours per week or what hours you have to have available each week. It's all up to you, completely up to you. You can schedule nothing for one week and you can open up 50 hours of availability if you want to the next week. It is totally dependent on you. And this is honestly perfect for me because I find my schedule to be rather unpredictable at times and irregular, especially with the transition between the summer hours where I'm tutoring a lot and during the school year when I have a main job that I have to go to and I don't have as much time for a side gig. So basically I have a set schedule for during the school year, but I can just delete hours as needed. If I want to go on a weekend trip, I can delete those hours and there's nothing bad that's going to happen to me. The only bad thing will happen if you delete a scheduled reservation. You do have to send a quick explanation. Usually it's fine, but if it is a last minute cancellation, then you might get penalized. But the only time I got penalized was when I canceled probably 3 at least reservations when I changed my traveling schedule anyways. But I canceled 3 reservations and they sent me a message, well, okay, now for the next week, your schedule is going to be available to regulars only. So that kind of sucked because as I mentioned, I didn't have regulars, but it was fine. I just created my schedule for the next week after that sort of penalty was over and I still got my schedule filled up. So another great thing about the flexibility is that you can just take it week by week. You can add hours for the next day. You can add hours for the next 3 weeks. You can add it 3 months in advance, which is what they say their best tutors do. Honestly, I cannot plan that far ahead, but I add my availability the week before and I usually get filled up. So it has not been a problem for me. The second thing I really have been appreciating about Cambly, especially this summer, is that they've been doing a bonus for Cambly Kids, where if you tutor a certain number of Cambly Kids in 1 week, you get a bonus and it gets exponentially higher the more kids you tutor. So I've been really trying to get a lot of kids in this week, and next week I think they have extended it again. They've extended it at least 3 times now, so actually if you want to try tutoring on Cambly, now would be a great time to start. They are especially looking for Cambly Kids tutors. So if you need some extra cash or you're looking for some teaching experience, I will have my referral link below, which will allow you to apply to Cambly, and it'll be beneficial for both of us. Alright, let's talk about the third thing I really appreciate about Cambly, and that is that you don't have to do anything to prepare for your lessons. On Cambly Kids, they are automatically registered into a series of lessons that come with presentation slides for each lesson, and those are just tailored specifically to them and their level, so you really don't have to do anything. They're very simple to just follow along. Adults can also choose to take a Cambly course, which has a series of presentations similar to the kids side, but they can also just find an article online they want to read through. There's a good site called Engu, which is good for that, or a lot of them just prefer to have conversation and get that speaking practice. So it might be a good idea to have some conversation topics prepared, but especially if they make a reservation, I found that they also have things they want to talk to you about because they read your profile and things like that. Usually the conversation gets flowing pretty easily and it's not really much of a problem. And that brings me to another aspect of Cambly that I really enjoy, and this is mainly to do with the adult side, which is that I just find it completely fascinating that you can talk to anybody in the world and you can just hack their brain, get a view into their country, their culture. It's just really amazing, honestly. They even have this written into their tutor guide that you essentially have a video chat into another part of the world, another culture, and you can ask them essentially whatever you want. I had tons of interesting conversations when I was doing the priority hours. One time I talked to a guy about intermittent fasting for an hour. Another time I talked to a guy about all the different countries he's traveled to for soccer tournaments because he's a really big fan of one of the teams. So that was really interesting to hear about all the different countries he's been to. Another time I talked to a guy about his experience living in the US as an exchange student. So that was really cool to hear about that. There's just tons of interesting conversations you can have. The possibilities are essentially endless about all the different things you could find to talk to with someone from a different part of the world. The fifth thing I like about Cambly is that they do pay every week. They just deposit it into PayPal, then I deposit it into my bank account, so that's a great thing. The sixth thing I like is that it's not a China-based company, which, let me clarify before you jump to conclusions. What I mean is that if you are in the Western Hemisphere, you don't have to wake up at crazy hours or you don't have to stay up late in order to find students to tutor. They are essentially a worldwide company, so there are students all over the world in virtually any time zone, so you can find students at any hour of the day, depending on your availability. The seventh thing I like about Cambly is that you don't have to market yourself. I filled out my bio in my application, I did my intro video, and I haven't really touched it since then, which might not be the best practice, but it's worked for me. I get students every week, my schedule fills up, and I don't really have to do anything to try to get more students or find students. They just find me. I don't really know how it works on the student side. Maybe it's just depending on my available hours, the hours that they are looking for, but I don't really have to do anything. They just come to me. Which is great. Anyways, that pretty much sums up all the good things that I really like and appreciate about Cambly. Now let's talk about some of the cons to teaching on Cambly, because there are some things that are not so great. The first one is that if someone cancels a reservation on you last minute, you don't get any compensation for that. On your reservation schedule, you can set how many hours beforehand someone can make a reservation. It can be 24 hours, 12 hours, or 6 hours. Right now I'm set at 6 hours. The main reason I have it set at 6 hours is so that I can get that last minute reservation, and if someone cancels 12 hours before or 24 hours before, then there's still time for someone else to reserve that spot. But unfortunately, if they do cancel within that 6 hours, there's no chance for someone else to take the spot. So I lose the pay, I lose the time. At least I know ahead of time I have the time free, but still it kind of sucks, so there's no compensation. The one thing they do compensate for is if it does get to the lesson time, the student hasn't canceled, but they don't show up, then you have to wait 10 minutes, but if they don't show up after 10 minutes, you can log off and you'll get paid for 10 minutes of talk time, or in that case, wait time. So honestly, that's why I prefer no-shows to cancellations, because at least I get something. At least I get a couple bucks. The second thing I don't really like is something I haven't experienced in a while, because as I mentioned, I haven't been doing priority hours, but this is something that does happen on priority hours, and that is, as I mentioned earlier, the free trial students. These students have a very low chance of actually being there because they want to learn English. I've heard from a lot of other tutors that they just come there and they say no English, and personally I can't think of many experiences I have had with free trial students, but there was one that sticks out that does kind of confirm what I've heard from other tutors. And basically what happened is it was a Brazilian guy. He was pretty young, probably like teenager, almost 20s, but he came in speaking a mixture of Portuguese, Spanish, and a very small amount of English. But then he asked, "Can we speak Spanish?" And I was like, okay, sure, I guess. And I was just confused the whole time. Didn't really know what he was there for. But at the end, he was like, "Oh, você bonita." I was like, okay, that means I'm pretty. Thanks. No way you were here. And I've heard of a lot worse experiences than that. Don't use your imagination too hard. And if you really want to know, you can go on the Reddit. But I will not be speaking on this today because it was not my experience. That was the worst experience I've had. Pretty privilege does exist on Cambly. I'm not going to deny it. There was another student one time who said, "Oh, there are lots of beautiful, smart tutors on Cambly." And I was just like, oh, thanks. Thanks. But now I'm on the kids side, so I don't really get those compliments and I don't mind. Now the third problem I want to talk about is something that has actually been happening this week to me more often than I've ever had it happen in the past, and that is connection issues. There are so many ways connection issues can happen. First of all, there are just so many connections along the way between you and wherever your student is in the world. So many things that could go wrong, so many moving parts, and that sucks on both sides because the students lost one of the lessons they paid for this week, and I lost that pay from not getting the full lesson. Now let's talk about another possible negative side to Cambly, which is the pay. This is not a big concern for me because living in the DR, the cost of living is much lower than it would be in the US. And as I mentioned, it is a side gig for me, so I already have my salary that is more than enough for me to live on there. So this is more of a side gig, spending money type of job for me. But if you are trying to make ends meet in the US, I really don't think this will be the best use of your time. I have heard there are better options out there. I think those are mainly more of the Asian, Chinese-based companies, but personally for me, the flexibility, the lack of requirements, the lack of minimum hours needed, and the zero prep time, the zero training time, that was all a great thing for me, and that's really what I was looking for in a job. So that's why Cambly works for me now. If I was to do something more permanently, maybe I would look for something else. But for now, Cambly is a perfect suit for me. Overall, it has been really nice to have a second stream of income and have money going straight into my US bank account. Overall, I have had a good experience on Cambly, despite some of the cons to the platform. I've met tons of people from different countries all over the world, countries I've never even dreamed of visiting. I've had fascinating conversations, and I think it has even helped me in my teaching in my first job, so that's great as well. So if you are looking for some extra spending money or some teaching experience and you need flexible hours, I would definitely suggest giving Cambly a try. Don't forget, I do have a referral link in the description if you do end up applying. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would give it a big thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!